Welcome back to The Reckoning. Into the next segment we go along, and I'm very glad to be joined now by Mr. Alex Newman. I know that many of you are familiar with him, a familiar voice here on the program, and of course on the screen as he joins us. Of course, he is an award-winning international journalist, educator, author, speaker, and does quite a bit of work. Of course, the CEO of Liberty Sentinel Media, the senior editor over at the New American Magazine, one of my favorite news sources, and here to talk to us today about the Red-Green Alliance. This is one, or the Red-Green Axis. I've heard both phrases used, but this is certainly, it makes for some interesting bedfellows in American politics, and I know it's not something that'll last very long between these Marxist DSA-aligned Democrats and the Muslim community that they have so buddied up to. We'll dive into that. He had a very interesting interview I wanted to hit on. Alex, thank you for joining me again. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
Hey, I always appreciate the opportunity to pick your brain. And, you know, this is something that we've seen quite a bit, of course, very relevant as we march along through these primaries last week in Michigan. Abdul al-Said, another not exactly DSA affiliated, but closely aligned candidate. We're seeing it all over the place. This interesting set of bedfellows between the Muslim movement forward in the United States and the radical leftists, these socialists. These two things are incompatible, humanism and Islam. These do not go together in a worldview, in a theological, in an ideological setting, and yet they have made political friends with each other here in the U.S. You just interviewed a former Iranian soldier. I know you've been diving into this. What's your take on this? What do Americans need to know about the red-green axis, these communists and jihadists, as you say, that are using each other in the war against our Christian West in the United States?
Well, thanks again for having me, Ryan. And I think the simplest way to try to explain what's happening here is just to quote Jesus. Jesus is quoted twice in the Gospels, in Matthew and in Luke. He says, "Whoever is not with me is against me." And so you think, what do radical jihadists and communists have in common? Well, not much, right? At least officially. One rejects even the existence of God, the existence of the metaphysical. The other insists that everybody in the world bow down and worship this deity that they call Allah. And, obviously, as you pointed out, Ryan, those two are not compatible. So where's the commonality? Why are they working together? Which they so obviously are. I mean, New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani is Exhibit A, a radical Muslim and a communist socialist who wants government-run grocery stores and government-run housing. Why is this happening? The simple answer is they have a common enemy. That common enemy is Christianity. It is the United States of America. And to quote the very wise director of policy and planning on the National Security Council during Trump's first term, Rich Higgins, in an incredible memo that he did. If you haven't read the memo, ladies and gentlemen, go get a copy of it. It's called the Higgins Memo. He explained that there is a global alliance of jihadists, of socialists, of communists, of globalists, of deep staters who are united in their quest, he says, to destroy the United States of America, not just as a nation, right? It's not enough just to destroy America as a free, independent, and sovereign country. He says they have to destroy it as an ideal. And so that's why we see the constant efforts by the communists, by the globalists, by the Islamists to demonize America as if it were some sort of hellhole, systemic racism, and all the rest of it. So I think that's really the essence of what's going on here, Ryan. They have a common enemy, and that's why they're working together.
And I guess you could then say the same thing, not just a political alliance here in U.S. politics, but I mean, we see the connection between Iran and China. I mean, this is, I guess, is that just basically a worldwide version of what we're looking at here in U.S. politics?
It's precisely what we're looking at, Ryan. And they used to not make that much of a secret about this. Like the Iranian mullahs, when they came to power, were openly associated with the Soviet Union. Like, what? Atheist, godless commies working with supposedly radical, devout Muslims? Something doesn't add up here. And we see the same thing to the present day. We see the communist Chinese, mass murdering communist dictatorship, working openly hand in glove with the mullahs in Iran. Now, I don't suspect the communist Chinese would like a bunch of radical Shiite Muslims running around their own country, but as long as they're over there shooting at Americans, that's quite all right. We'll be happy to collaborate with them. And so we're seeing now at the international level, you see this so clearly in the different groups that are forming within the UN General Assembly, a global alliance of the leftist kleptocracies, the socialist and communist dictatorship, Cuba, Nicaragua, the Kremlin, which despite what you may have heard is not some bastion of conservative Christianity, sorry guys, communist China, etc., with the radical Islamic regimes that unfortunately populate so much of the Middle East, North Africa, even all the way out into Southeast Asia.
Yep. So what's the plan? If they're successful both here in U.S. politics, abroad, successful in destroying the United States of America, this constitutional republic where, although the shreds of it, which we are trying to cling on to and restore, if they're successful in this, what do? Do they have to turn on each other? I mean, you just were able to speak with this Mohammed Faridi, a former, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps operative turned Christian leader. Is it just, well, we defeat our common enemy and then we have to turn on each other? Was there some sort of master plan? Is that just, we're not going to talk about it until we get to that point? What's the goal here?
Well, I think each of these groups, Ryan, think that they're using the other ones, right? I think the Muslims think that they're using the commies and the globalists. I think the globalists, I think they think they're very clever. They think they're using, hey, let's import millions of Muslims into America and it'll be great. It'll destroy the country. Because I think they think they're using the commies and thinking the same thing. And the commies have been thinking this for a long time, right? Under Yuri Andropov, the KGB, going back 75 years, these guys were sending Soviet operatives, intelligence agents into the Middle East to radicalize Muslims, thousands of them, against America, against Israel, against the Western world. That's where the great Satan, the little Satan, all that foolishness came out of. And so that is ultimately the goal, is bring down the Christian West, what we used to call Christendom in the free world. And I think at that point, the Chi Coms, I'm sure, are having discussions about this. What do we do once we succeed in taking down the evil Taiwan and the evil USA? What do we do with all these Muslims that we've given all these weapons to? And I'm sure the Muslims are thinking the same thing. Oh, once we get rid of America, the great Satan, what are we going to do about the Chi Coms and all the other commies? And I suspect that we'll see what we typically see with Islamist governments and communist governments: butchery on a massive scale. They'll line everybody up against a wall and shoot them if they think they can get away with it, and probably war. So, it's not going to end well for anybody. I keep trying to explain that to people. Even the dummies that they call the useful idiots in America, that think like they're going to sit on top of the ruins of America as part of this new communist regime. You dummies, you're going to get put up against a wall and shot the moment communist Chinese troops step foot on this soil if you're not careful.
Yeah, never before have I seen such an all-out brawl right now inside the Democrat Party for this lineup to be the next round of middle managers that surely think they'll have some higher position than they'll actually get in the new regime if they're given an opportunity. So then I guess that begs the question. Let me ask you, you travel, you write, you speak all over. The response to this, as far as what people are, looking at and seeing, you and I understand what's going on here now. And what I'm curious about, of course, I think, this could implode very quickly. We've already seen it in the radical left before. They set up the LGB and then the T comes in. Now the G's and the B's are mad about the T, and the whole thing just implodes because it doesn't work. It's not based on any kind of truthful, ordered worldview. When it comes to the same thing, are we looking at an implosion? Are people starting to get wise to this? Or do we really have a cause for concern outside of places like Michigan, New York City, for this to continue growing?
I think it's a major cause for concern right now. Of course, there's always the chance that the infighting will continue to grow, and that's not unusual. I mean, you see this with the mafia, right? Even within the same mafia organization, you see the guy under the top guy shoots him to try to take the top dog. I mean, that's normal when you're dealing with criminal organizations, terrorist organizations, crazy dictatorships, and radical movements. So there's nothing unusual about that. But I think it's dangerous to underplay the threat that we are facing. I think this is actually an existential threat. They don't have to make every step right to make this hell for America. They've already opened up the borders during Obama, during Joe Biden. They've already allowed who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dangerous individuals into this country. And they tried this before, back in the 60s and 70s. Their plan to do the Weather Underground, which was working with the communist Cubans, which was a front for the Soviet Union. Their plan, they found out, the FBI, when they infiltrated them, was to collapse the United States, kick off a revolution, and then use the chaos to bring in hostile foreign governments to occupy parts of America. And according to Larry Grathwohl, who infiltrated the Weather Underground for the FBI, their plan was to set up concentration camps where they were going to intern tens of millions of Americans, and they planned to exterminate 10% of the population of the United States. Now, they obviously did not succeed back in the 60s and 70s. They did bomb the Pentagon. They bombed the State Department. They bombed the Capitol. They murdered police officers. I mean, they wreaked havoc in this country, but they didn't succeed because, as their own ringleaders realized, they didn't have the culture, they didn't have the education system, and they did not have the businesses. We're in a very different position today where they have captured at least large swaths of the control over all of those institutions. And so, folks, don't underestimate this threat. It's amazing how quickly societies can collapse when they're weakened like ours is.
Yeah, we're certainly on the edge of it, and that means we have to fight like our lives depend on it, because they do. Alex Newman, CEO of Liberty Sentinel and the senior editor at the New American Magazine. Thank you for sharing some wisdom with us. All the best, and we will talk soon.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
You as well. Go and follow him, folks. LibertySentinel.org, thenewamerican.com. Lots of good reporting over there. And, of course, we'll have him back very frequently as these things come up. Back on the other side, hour number 2 is ahead. Don't go anywhere. The Reckoning has more to give.